Hello and welcome to Take Me Home, the podcast offering a social democratic alternative for the politically homeless. My name is Sebastian.moore.
And I'm Hilary.salt.
And we are delighted to be joined by, I want to say Dr Philip Kiszely. Is that right?
You can say doctor. If you want to say doctor, say doctor.
Great.
Yeah.
Senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, cultural historian and political commentator. And tell me, did I pronounce your surname right?
You did. It's kind of I'm not that fussy about it because over the 53 years of my life, I've learned not to be, because there's just no alternative. I'd go Gaga if I was. So yeah, Kiszely is perfectly fine. Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
And tell us, where does that come from, Kiszely? What?
Yeah, so it's Hungarian actually, and my father came to Britain in 1959, so he was one of the part of the Hungarian uprising in 1956. Came out of the country. It's quite James Bondian actually. Jumped off a moving train and actually came out of the country under hay bales in a horse and cart, and then was a refugee in Rome for 3 years, and then came over to Britain in 1959 because his brother had been repatriated in Britain immediately after the war. His brother was quite a lot older than him, and my father came to live in Manchester, lived in Bury, and worked in the mills there before he started his own business. So it's Hungarian via Bury, and now I'm in West Yorkshire.
So we've already interviewed Stephen Ballog on the podcast, so we're going to have to keep this Hungarian theme going.
Well, he's more Hungarian than me because both his parents are Hungarian. It's just my father and my mother's English. So yeah.
So tell us, because we were talking just before we started recording about the verdict this morning by the Supreme Court on what a woman is. Are you enlightened as to find out what a woman is?
Well, thank God we've got the Supreme Court, So we have these very, very complex, tricky issues explained to us massively. Shock horror, men aren't women. It's amazing, isn't it? I can't believe that we're so stupid as a society that we're in this situation where we've had to have this explained to us. It seems that we went bonkers sometime around about 2015, and I think it went on steroids during and after lockdown. I think for some probably very specific reasons. A lot of men started thinking that they were women. After that, I think they were just stuck with a lot of pornography for about 12 months. But it goes further back, the advent of identity politics really kicking in around about 2012, 2013, and then everybody becoming obsessed with activism. So it starts with Me Too, then it's BLM, then everybody's locked down, everybody goes crazy, then it's trans, then it's green stuff, and now it's Hamas, for God's sake. So it's just all part, for me, it's all part of the same thing. And trans is just one iteration of all that craziness as far as I'm concerned. But at least we're told that men are men and women are women now. Hey, great.
That was a brief history of the 2000s, wasn't it, in a very rapid sprint. Do you think it will make differences in the real world, in things like sport and police guidance on searching women and, all those areas where, things have been difficult for women?
That's a really good question. I'd like to say yes, but I think actually that's going to take quite a bit of time, because I know from personal experience that education, and I'm talking the whole of education from primary to postgraduate, is completely captured by gender politics. Okay, so that's one thing, and legislation isn't the only thing there. That's not really going to push things. You need to have hearts and minds, and my God, you don't have hearts and minds in education. The police, again, it's kind of quite similar, really. I was just talking about a story yesterday about West Yorkshire and the Greater Manchester police forces being, anti-racist forces, and while they were being anti-racist police forces, going about it in a very kind of racist way, being anti-white and all of that kind of thing. So I think with the trans thing, it's a really good start, and it's a very clear message. But I think we've got a long way to go yet on the ground, and in terms of people's experience. Having said that, most people don't encounter any of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And most people just think it's silly anyway. So maybe that's just in my world, and maybe that's just what I see. But I think it is going to take a bit of time to kick in. Hopefully, we're at the back end of it now. I think shaming and taking the mickey out of people is probably quite good at this stage, because especially the pronouns in bios and pronouns in emails, signing off with pronouns, you know, ordinary centrist blokes signing off with pronouns in emails. We mustn't let them forget that. Okay. Yeah. I think that's something to bring up time and time again, because this stuff is silly, and it needs to be seen as silly, but it also has massively profound implications. So we need to attack it at all levels, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw that, somebody using pronouns. Firstly, I thought it was a joke. It was in an email or something. And then I thought, well, are they making a political point? Is that very, against transgenderism and stuff? Are they trying to make the point? I didn't realise, I couldn't possibly fathom that they were actually trying to get on board with the pronoun usage. That was quite a wake-up call, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the pronouns thing has been around for quite a long time. And all of this stuff, I mean, you'll know this and your viewers will know this, but all of this stuff, this trans stuff has been around a long, long time. The foundational text, Judith Butler and all of that kind of thing were kind of late 80s, early 90s, I think. So it's been around in the academy, certainly, for a long, long time. But it's only when it went mainstream through social media and all of that kind of thing that all of a sudden you've kind of got quite a problem with it, because it's just going everywhere and it's infecting everything. The pronouns are one thing. I was in education. People were also refusing to use capital letters in their names as well. I don't know whether you've come across that one. That's so because they were saying that all of this stuff is just imposed upon us, and gender is imposed upon us. So I'm not going to use capital letters in my name because that's me pushing back on society, kind of making me do these things. So it's all a bit crazy.
I do worry it's sometimes a trick. Like it's a bluff, and then we fall for it. So we get annoyed, or we say, "What on earth is this? You're not supposed to use capital letters." And then somebody's going to jump out and go, "Ha, that was just a joke." But then so much of this is sort of pushed the boundaries of satire. It's kind of hard to imagine. You mentioned that talking about whether normal people are sort of going along with this. It does strike me, and I'd be interested to know what you think. Because you said you grew up in quite a working class background. Do you think there is a big difference in class in the way that people respond to these things? Because it does seem like, from my experience, the working class don't really go along with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's my experience anyway. Look, before all of the pronouns, specific rights, the wanting to be in particular kind of female areas and doing all of that kind of thing, no one cared. If you were a bloke who dressed up as a woman, no one cared. Right? Seriously, no one cared whether you were. I grew up in Bury, okay, and you could walk around Bury dressed as a woman, and no one would care, right? It was only when it became aggressive and it became overtly misogynistic and it became something more. It wasn't just about a fetish that ultimately was harmless and was just about you. It was about something else, and it was ideological, and it was all of those things. That's when it really kicked in. But I think, yeah, for most working class people, look, most people are concerned about paying the mortgage or working for a living, bringing up children. So that's probably when it concerns them in terms of their children. But the rest of the time, they're not interested. It is a chattering class thing. It's a luxury belief. It's people who've got too much time on their hands and too much money and take themselves too seriously. That's the kind of thing, And so, Yeah, it's good to push back on this stuff because I think it represents something else as well. I think it represents a kind of snobbery, a cultural snobbery. If you're on side with us, that means you're clever. That means you're well read. That means you're sophisticated. No, it doesn't. It just means you're gullible, right? That's all it means. So all of those things, it's all bundled together, I think, and a lot of it is really distasteful as well as being silly. So that's why I say before, we do have to push back on these things for both of those reasons.
Yeah.
So you're a cultural historian.
Yeah,
What aspects of British culture are you proud of?
that's a really good question, because there's so much of it. Actually, my interest in British culture, I'm interested in all of British culture, but I focus on the post-war, post-1945 stuff, the emergence of popular culture, in particular, popular literature, music, television, film, all of those things. But generally, I'm proud of Britain being a driver of culture. And I think that's what we're a political driver, where we change society, we change the world. But specifically in relation to culture, I think that's really, really true as well. I like the complex combination of tradition and change in British culture and how those two things kind of relate to each other. And they don't always sit comfortably. But I like that. But in terms of pride, it's what we've done, it's how we've driven change, but how we've kind of imprinted ourselves on the world, whether that's through the Industrial Revolution, whether that's through the common law, whether that's through democracy, all of those things, whether that's through changes in society, invention, all of those things. But I'm just generally proud of who we are. Now, that's obviously a very unfashionable position, and it's a particularly unfashionable position where I'm from, which is academia. I spent 25 years in the university sector, so that was always quite difficult to reconcile for me. And obviously I didn't do it very well because I'm not in academia anymore. But that pride of being British, and I very much do see myself as being British, or English actually, is very important to me. Yeah.
I think one of the things that's quite interesting about people's relationship to art and culture these days is how kind of personalised it is. So I mentioned the other day in the pub that I'm going to see Morrissey
Yeah.
in his tour, and you could see it kind of divided the room immediately. So half the people were tut-tutting at the idea that I might go and see somebody who's so politically as they would see on the wrong side.
And what
Well,
side is that with Morrissey?
So Morrissey was very pro Brexit. He's very SDP, I think, really in many ways. He's very sensible.
Have you reached out to him? Tried to recruit him?
Do you know I should do that, shouldn't I? Yeah.
Well, the thing with Morrissey is really interesting, right? So where in the 80s, he had all of the proto-identitarians loved him. Okay,
Yeah.
that absolutely did. So he came from this kind of post-punk, indie type music, and he was very alternative.
Meet his murder.
His murder, vegetarianism, republicanism, very anti-monarchy. He was very androgynous. He kind of pretty much confessed to every kind of social ill in the book, and he cultivated this kind of very awkward but arrogant persona, and all of the people who proto-identitarians, Hilary, I think I'd say that they absolutely adored him. But it was obvious to me right from the get-go that one, he was very patriotic. Okay. Two, he was actually quite, in terms of his politics, he was quite right-leaning. Three, he didn't suffer fools. And all of these things started to come out, Irish blood, English heart, and some of the questionable song titles, well, they saw them as questionable. I just saw them as quite fun. And you wearing a flag of St. George or waving a Union Jack and all of this kind of thing. And everybody just went into meltdown about it, right? Because they felt as though they'd been betrayed. That was why he had such a massive impact. That and his massive talent as well. So he was kind of, he's a really, really interesting one. And I think that there are a few things happening here. I'm probably a really good example of that culture being very, very kind of bespoke, because we were just talking about my bookcase behind us, and I'm very interested in 60s and 70s genre literature. That's what I absolutely love. And I'm able to collect that kind of stuff because I can just go onto sites like ABE Books and find whatever I want and spend an absolute fortune. It's terrible for me, but there you go. It's an addiction. And we can now make our experience bespoke. The other thing that drives that is the fact that the general popular culture, the contemporary culture, is so appalling, right? So I'm never going to watch the BBC. I'm never going to watch ITV or Channel 4. I'm probably not going to listen to contemporary popular music that's in the top 40. Well, I'm certainly not going to do that. I couldn't name you any groups or any performers that are in the top 40. Okay. That sense of fracture, that sense of people living in their own little silos has developed massively. One, because technology has allowed us to do it. Okay. And we can look to the past and we can find all sorts of different niche things. But two, the general mainstream is probably the worst it's ever been in my life. And it doesn't look as though it's going to get any better. I don't know what you think about that.
So, I mean, is what you're saying there that the culture is not good enough, rather than that you don't like the people making the culture? Because I think that's what I'm trying to kind of get my head around, whether you can separate art from the artist. So I think Oscar Wilde said something. Well, Oscar Wilde said something about everything, didn't he? But didn't he say something like, "There's no such thing as moral and immoral books. There's just books that are well written and badly written."
Yeah, there are, and I kind of go along with that. Although I've changed a little bit, right? So I would have said a while ago, right, you just separate the art and the artist, and all I'm interested in is the text, and is the text any good? Does it speak to me? And that's it, really. And I would imagine most viewers would probably be along those lines. And I suppose it's slightly different what the text is. I probably wouldn't want, even if it were any good, in my living room where I am now, a picture painted by Adolf Hitler hanging on the above the fireplace, just because it would remind me of Adolf Hitler all the time, and it's in my home, and it's a piece of visual art. That doesn't necessarily negate what I've just said, but I think now, with people just going so stupid, I tend to just kind of think, I'm going to avoid your stuff. And I'll give you some examples. Old actors that I used to love on television in the 70s, their tweets and them, you getting quite a kind of access to what they think and who they are on things like Twitter and Facebook and all of those things. And them just being so monumentally stupid about things like around the culture wars, particularly around things like Palestine and stuff like that. I do tend to think now, and I'm not saying it's right, but I do tend to think now, oh God, I'm just not going to watch the stuff you're in anymore because I see you. But that again is slightly different. That isn't a text. That isn't a book. That's seeing them. Right?
Yeah.
Look, no matter what they're doing, whoever they're playing, you're looking at them and thinking, oh God, yeah, you said this. So yeah, it's become slightly more complex for me now. And I'm not sure I'm that comfortable with it actually, but it's just the way it is. I'm just being honest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you think one of the problems is the way that we get information nowadays, and the fact that, 30, 40 years ago, you wouldn't know what these actors thought about these political issues. You'd just be watching them and things, and then you switch off the TV and that would be it. And one of the problems seems to be that you're constantly exposed to the political views of people that probably aren't in a position to really speak about these things.
Yeah, that's it. That absolutely nails it. And it feels as though so many people think in complete lockstep, and it's always a disappointment when the people who you thought were kind of fairly kind of quite cutting edge and a bit different and a bit radical whenever it was in the 1970s and were doing new kinds of things, just think exactly what they're supposed to think now. And it might be just because they're older, they're in their 70s and their 80s, although I know people in the 70s and 80s who think amazing things, you know what I mean? And it might be just because they're actors and I've projected all of those good things onto them in the past, you know, because I just like what they're in and I like the scripts and I like the way things are directed. So yeah, I think it is. I don't want to know what these people think. It's you know, it's not really what they do for a living, but it's all pushed in our faces. You know, it's different. Like with me, for example, this is what I do for a living. I tell you what I think about politics and culture. Okay, so if you don't like it, great, turn off. But that's it. That's
Don't
what I
turn
do,
off, listeners.
Right?
By the way, don't
don't turn off just yet. But wait until I really get going. But it's that kind of thing, and it's such a disappointment. More than anything, I'm not outraged or anything like that. I'm just disappointed. It's a dull feeling rather than a sharp feeling, and that's the worst thing in the world. It's just, oh well, oh God, oh not another one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Is the counterculture now conservative?
I think so. I think the counterculture is conservatism, and I think if you think about young people, cultural conservatism, I would say.
Yeah.
Mm.
If you think about young people, certainly the people who are the movers and shakers on in the online world, it's people like Harrison Pitt, Connor Tomlinson, and those kinds of people who are fairly radical conservatives who are saying something completely different. They're saying something different to the BBC, Google, social, Facebook, and all of this establishment type stuff. The really strange thing is we've got an establishment that thinks they're alternative. You know, just because you dye your hair blue, you think you're alternative. But if you're saying exactly the same thing as all the universities, you know, all of the mainstream media, all of the tech giants in Silicon Valley, you're really not alternative. You are the new establishment. And I think it's interesting that this new conservatism, well, it's not new, is it? But this conservatism, which is much more culture-based, which is much more literate, I think. I mean, there's always been literate conservatism, but it's different to kind of Thatcherism, for example, right? All of this kind of stuff is pushing forward and is making a change. And it seems to me that the really cutting edge young people are conservatives now. And if you would have told me that when I was young in the 1980s, listening to the Smiths and Morrissey, I would have been quite surprised at that if we were looking, 30 years into the future and seeing this.
Yeah.
Well, young people are rebellious, aren't they? And so if they're getting told to do one thing, they're naturally going to want to rebel.
That's true. Yeah. It probably leads on a little bit, Philip. Do you want to mention about your literary festival that you're organising?
I do. My God. We're doing this festival. So it's on the 23rd and 24th of May. It's New Culture Forum. And it's our first literary festival. And it's the first literature festival of its kind, I think, in this country. Because usually you've got these literary festivals where, like Hay and Oxford and all of those places, where everyone's cancelling each other like crazy. And it's all absurdly right on and woke and all of this kind of stuff. This is completely the opposite. This is like a free speech festival, and we've got some amazing people. So it's a kind of miniature festival. It's on the Friday night and all day Saturday. We've got who have we got? We've got Matt Goodwin, we've got Lionel Shriver, we've got Andrew Doyle, we've got Alison Pearson, we've got Gareth Roberts, we've got Lawrence Fox, we've got Ben Cobley, I think, who's involved with the SDP. We've got Graham Towler. We've just got lots and lots of people. So I think it's going to be a fantastic event. So if you want to go to the New Culture Forum website. If you just log on to the New Culture Forum website there, you can get tickets there. They went on sale on Monday and they're going really quickly. So you probably need to get them quite soon. How was that?
And just while we're letting you plug things, did you want to mention locals as well?
NCF locals, but this is wonderful. My God, it's super. So I'm the director now of the national organizer for NCF Locals, which is essentially our grassroots movement, which lots and lots of SDP members will know about, because lots and lots of SDP members are part of Locals. And Locals is, for those people who don't know, Locals is about meeting up, having a drink, talking politics, finding like-minded people in a space where there probably isn't a huge amount of like-minded people, in a culture that isn't a huge amount of like-minded people. That's one thing. If you want to get involved with campaigning or lobbying, you can do that as well. So we're getting more and more active in doing that. The various branches all around the country, I think we've got about 30 branches around the country. All of these branches, people meet up informally, or they meet up slightly more formally, and there will be speakers that come. So William Clouston's done quite a few of these things. I'm all over the place, obviously. Lots of NCF type people are there as well, and lots of general political commentators. And people who are involved in the culture wars. So there's lots to do. It can be what you want it to be. Like I say, if you just want it to be social, it can be social. If you want it to be something more than that, and you feel as though you want to be making a difference, it can be that as well. So do get in touch. Go on to the New Culture Forum website, and you can sign up to Locals there, and we'd be delighted to have you.
So
Okay.
we've done a lot of culture today, haven't we? But we've got to do Culture Club yet.
Exactly.
And I'm not really bringing anything to Culture Club, but I did just want to mention that I did go last night, because you talked about football the other week, didn't you? Mm. And last night I went to a cup final, Earlham versus Hyde, in the Manchester Premier final, and the team I was supporting, Earlham, won.
Very good.
They were the underdogs, but they won convincingly.
And you were supporting Earlham because you live closer to Earlham?
I was supporting Earlham because I know one of the players.
Okay.
A friend of a friend kind of thing. So
I might be. Am I wrong in saying that Earlham? There's something about Earlham and football that is really historically important. I don't know whether it's where Manchester United first started there, or Earlham were the first team in Manchester, or the first team in. I don't know, but there's a connection, I think, with Earlham.
I don't know. Sure. No, Manchester United originally started out in Newton Heath.
Yeah,
they were called Newton Heath. Yeah. I don't know about Earlham.
The song that they sing, the Earlham fans sing, is "Bus Stop in Salford. We're just a bus stop in Salford." So,
do you know, my parents came to visit a week ago, and my mum sent me a message, and she said on the flight back home, because they live in Spain, she said she met a football player. And I said, okay, who was it? What club? And she said it was some club in Manchester, and it began with H, and it was 4 letters. And I thought it could only be Hyde. So I think she was chatting to one of the players on the flight to Spain.
Super.
Yeah.
I know you wanted to bring something this week to Culture Club.
Yeah, well, Sebastian. I thought, we're recording this on the Wednesday of Holy Week, Easter week, and I thought it would be negligible to avoid talking about Easter. So I thought I'd just give a little bit of a sort of summary, if you can even begin to do that with something like Easter, and why it's important to many Brits. So I presume you know what Easter is.
I do, yeah. Christian festival, movable feast.
So Easter is the most important event in the Christian calendar. I think all Christians would probably agree on that, because a lot of the biblical story, so the Bible, obviously the founding text of Christianity, a lot of that is really leading up to and prophesizing the death of Jesus and his ultimate resurrection. Now, Easter week, so it starts really with Palm Sunday,
Which we've had, haven't we? That was last week.
That was on Sunday. And I go to St Anne's Church in the city centre, which is a really nice, it's quite high church. So I don't know if you know the difference between high church and low church. Do you?
A kind of broad, a high church is more, it's got more the icons and the formal prayer and singing, isn't it? Rather than the more free-flowing.
It's certainly more bound up in tradition and historic, let's say historic language. So things like my church, for example, used the Book of Common Prayer from 1662.
Okay.
Wow. And I think this is important to Christians in varying degrees. This link to the past and the way that Christians have worshipped for the last 2,000 years. So Palm Sunday commemorates the day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey.
Yeah.
And the citizens laid down palm leaves. So you might, I think, if you go to a church, you might be given a palm leaf, or I was given a cross that was made out of palm leaf, supposedly. And then as we go through, we got Maundy Thursday tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Now, Maundy Thursday commemorates the Last Supper, where Jesus washed the feet of the disciples. So you might, if you go to a high church or a sort of a slightly more traditional church, you might actually have a chance for the priest to wash your feet, which I did last year, which makes you very uncomfortable, doesn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't let anybody touch my feet in a public place. What do you think, Philip? Well, could you do that?
No, I wouldn't. I'm where I live in a square here, a Georgian square, and there's a great big. I'm looking at it now. A great big 18th century church, literally just opposite my front window here, and I do go to church occasionally, not as often as I should do, but I can't imagine a scenario in which everyone's getting their feet washed in there.
So just to sort of round up, we have Good Friday, which is commemorates the day that Jesus was crucified, and then Easter Sunday, which often people will have Easter eggs or some form of chocolate to represent that sort of new birth when Jesus was resurrected.
Simnel cake. We'll be having simnel cake.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. What's that?
You don't know what simnel cake is?
No.
It's a bit like a Christmas cake, but no icing.
Okay.
You just have marzipan on top and then 11 balls on top to represent the disciples other than Judas.
Okay. Wow. Well, Judas was replaced.
Not on the simnel cake, he wasn't.
So Good Friday is a very somber day, obviously. It's quite, I encourage anybody to go and find a service, because it's quite an interesting day to go to church. The Catholic tradition is they have the Stations of the Cross, which is the 14 stations, and it represents the 14 events that happened when Jesus was on his way to getting crucified, like him falling for the first time, and Simon of Cyrene carrying the cross, and so forth. And you might find that again in Anglican churches, and this is the kind of the weird thing, and I think it's difficult for people to understand who maybe are less are outside of Christianity, because in the UK, because Anglicanism, it doesn't follow the same tradition as the Reformation, which was the Lutherans and the Calvinists, and you'll often hear this term via media, which is a Latin phrase saying like the middle way. So it has a lot of the traditions of the Catholic Church, even though it's out of the Catholic Church. And this goes back to Henry VIII. But so you will find things like the Stations of the Cross in some Anglican churches. So I would like to read something from the Gospel of Luke. This is chapter 23. I think you might know this.
Okay.
And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him, and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Is that familiar?
That. Yes, I know that.
Quite a famous passage in Luke. So there you go. That is the Easter week.
Okay. And the Easter eggs are nothing to do with Christianity, no?
Yeah, the Easter egg, it's new birth, isn't it?
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
How it links. I don't know when Easter eggs kind of came into the culture. I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
We'd have to ask our cultural historian.
Yes, what do you think? Where do Easter eggs come from?
That's putting me on the spot, isn't it? One of the things that I was just thinking about while I was just listening to your conversation there was actually how little of the detail I know of Christianity. And I probably knew a little bit more when I was younger, because I did go to a C of E school, a C of E primary school. But for me, to my shame, it's fallen by the wayside a little bit. And I think a lot of people are like that. And I think that's very bad for us, because part of our story as a country, Christianity is front and center to our story as a Christianity. It's part of, it underpins a lot of all of the stuff that I was saying before. The stuff that I was proud about. I think Christianity is the basis of all of that kind of stuff, and the Ten Commandments. I think what's been happening recently, I seem to have been commenting on stories about schools cancelling Easter, and another instance of Easter being changed and the name being changed, and it's seeming to have disappeared from the public space. And Eid seems to have taken over the public space, actually, because the Prime Minister, the police force, the Mayor of London, all of those people, it's Eid, and we haven't, Lent. Nobody's mentioned Lent. It seems that Lent has been given up for Lent.
We mentioned it because we were talking about Pancake Day.
Yeah, well, I would expect a podcast like this to mention it, but I think in the general mainstream it's been marginalised. So I think one of our tasks is to reframe and put Easter as an English tradition, as an English festival, as a Christian festival, again front and centre of what we do and what this country is, because there seems to be a sense of, and I know everybody's talked about this a lot, but it's almost as though we're cancelling our own history, and that idea of if you remove heritage, if you take it away and you pretend it's not the same thing. So I was just speaking about I can't remember who it was now, but they were saying, Easter is a pagan festival. It was some education material for children, and they're saying Easter is a pagan festival. That's where it comes from. If you remove religion from Easter and you move Christianity and you remove Christ from Easter, you are fundamentally messing with our cultural heritage. And when you do that to a culture and a society, you make it fundamentally unstable, right? Yeah. When you remove history or you mess around with history, you make that society fundamentally unstable. I think that's obviously what they want to do, but I think it's up to us to push back and fight back. And I think that's not even if you don't have to be a Christian. What you need to be is a cultural Christian as well, I suppose, and proud of our heritage and wanting to kind of continue with our culture. So that's on my mind all the time. I know it's a little bit of a kind of sidestep, but when we're talking about Easter and when you were talking about Easter, that was just what I was thinking about there. I was ashamed of myself because I don't know enough about it.
Well, we're doing our bit, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
And we do have a special episode next week for St. George's Day as well, don't we?
We do.
So
we'll be talking about the nation.
We'll be talking about the nation, yeah. So, Philip, just on Culture Club, we know you have a very specific niche interest. Do you want to tell us about that?
That sounds dodgy, doesn't it?
It sounds like there's a specialist website for that.
And you have to dress in a certain way. No, it's as we were saying before. I'm really interested in detective fiction, crime fiction, and espionage fiction primarily of the 60s and 70s. The 70s stuff is really good. So that's what I collect and have done for years and years and years. And if I just remove, you can see how much of it there is there. It goes on forever and ever and ever. So yeah, that particular kind of genre literature, and I've written about it as well as read it. So that's what I'm really interested in, and that interest has taken a bit of a turn lately because some of it is being cancelled and being altered. Actually, they're rewriting the books. So if you think about Agatha Christie, for example, you think about Ian Fleming, those authors which are central to our culture, our popular culture, they're being tinkered with. Oh well, this is racist or this is sexist, so we have to rewrite it. Sensitivity readers are rewriting all of this stuff. So one of the reasons I wanted to do the literature festival is again to push back on all of that kind of stuff, for the reasons, exactly the same reasons I was saying before about Easter. If you're tinkering with your heritage and rewriting it and changing it, and you're literally removing the foundations of your culture, and you make it, like I say, you make things very unstable. So for me, that literature is really important, and just because I love it as well. I love stepping back into that time and exploring it.
So could you give us a couple of examples of authors, novels that you're particularly fond of?
Yeah, I can give you some several examples actually. There's an author called George Sims, who no one's ever heard of, but was quite big in the 60s and 70s, and he wrote kind of fairly dark mystery novels that are essentially based in London. So there's a lot of London of the 60s and 70s. And his protagonists tend to be, this is why I like them, antiquarian booksellers, or deal in old manuscripts or antiques and that kind of thing. So they're set around that world, but they're really quite hard hitting. They're really quite noirish and dark. So they're wonderful. There's another writer, I'm just looking, called Donald Mackenzie, who writes a little bit like kind of Raymond Chandler, that kind of stuff. Again, he was based in Britain. He was actually Canadian, but he was based in Britain, and he had series characters who were either thieves or private eyes or detectives, and they're kind of crime novels. Another great writer is someone called Ross MacDonald that viewers might have heard of. He's a bit more famous. He's American, so he was the inheritor of the Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, Mickey Spillane tradition, and he's just an incredible writer. I could go on all day about this. Probably John le Carré needs a mention as well.
I absolutely adore John le Carré novels. There's something about them. The words it feels something. It's really hard to kind of articulate actually what I feel when I'm reading a John le Carré novel.
I don't think I've ever read one. I'm afraid.
You should. Okay. And I believe he was from Poole, which is where I'm from.
Ah, right.
Which I found out recently. So
fellow Pooler. He was kind of quite an interesting character because his father was a kind of con man and did lots of time in prison, and was a kind of serial liar and habitual thief and all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of that stuff filters into his work. There's a novel called A Perfect Spy, which is essentially about the relationship between a man and his father, and it's their relationship essentially. His father was called Ronnie Cornwell, and he was a kind of a con man and a gangster. So a lot of these novels, while they're genre novels, they're actually about other things, and that's quite a really good example. Like, great literature doesn't just do what it says on the tin; it kind of does something else. And so something like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is not just about the espionage world. It's about the end of empire. It's about Britain changing. It's about the tough world of the 1970s and the despair and the depression around that kind of era, actually. So they can be quite profound. They don't all have to be. Some of them are. There's another set of novels I love called the Hank Janssen novels, which are just pulp novels, 190 pages of bang, 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 and that's fine for me as well. But they tend to be they give you a new world, and that's what art's supposed to do. You can disappear into another world or disappear into this world and think about it differently, and I think that's what literature does for me. And I think that's one of the things we've lost. People read all the time, but they're reading texts and they're reading social media and they're reading little sound bites. They're not or listening to little sound bites and reading bits and pieces of text. They're not sitting for a couple of hours in the evening quietly and reading novels. At least I don't think they are. Loads of people might say, well, actually, I do, which is brilliant. But I get the impression that people don't do that people can't stay off their phones for more than 20 minutes. And I think that's a real shame.
And I'm going to make an effort to do that over Easter. Sit down with a book for a couple of hours, turn my phone off.
Good.
Great.
And go to a church service.
Okay.
Everybody listening.
Okay.
I'm watching this, looking at what's behind Philip, and I have a bookcase filled with books, but what I'm jealous of is that he's actually needs a ladder to get to his.
I know.
Isn't that cool?
It's fabulous.
And this is why we should be building houses with really high ceilings so that you have to have a ladder to get to your books.
Great.
Yeah, well, this is a very old house. This was built in the 1790s, so it's got a hugely high ceiling. It's nearly 4 meters high. So, the only thing is, I just have to, if I come home half cut on a Friday night, I have to stay off the ladder.
Yeah, we'll have to put that in the manifesto. That'll be another thing we can pitch for.
Yeah,
Lidos, ladders,
and crown green
bowling greens. Yeah,
great architecture. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Philip. That was really interesting, and it makes me want to go away and really invest more in British culture, which I hope people listening feel as well.
Yes, thanks, Philip. Thanks for joining us. It's been really interesting.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much indeed.
Okay. So, as always, people, please do follow the show, subscribe, like it, recommend it to your friends. And we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening.
Happy Easter.